Are you considering divorce? Are you dealing with it now? Are you on the other side and not sure what comes next? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Divorce Do's and Don'ts Show with your host, Lisa C. Decker.
Welcome to the show, everyone. So good to see you. I'm Marcella. I'm Lisa Decker's assistant and the producer of this show. I'd like to introduce Lisa, who is our host. Lisa is a certified divorce financial analyst, and she is also a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce. Lisa is also the CEO and founder of Divorce Money Matters and Divorce Town USA. So Lisa, what can we expect today?
Thank you so much, Marcella. Marcella is my executive assistant and client concierge and all around gal that helps me with everything. And she's going to be behind the scenes here today, helping with the show. And I appreciate you being here, Marcella. It's always fun to do the show together. And today we have a special guest. We have Tony Scarpero, and Tony has a passion for helping others because he went through a tough divorce in 2010, and he understands this very challenging time that you may be facing. So one of the most common mistakes that we see in divorce is people waiting too long to see if they qualify for a mortgage or refinancing their home that they may not be able to afford. And today we're going to talk about how divorce changes the mortgage lending process. And it really does, folks. And so I want to welcome our longtime Divorce Town USA member, Tony Scarpero. Tony, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you. I know that you have been serving clients in the Atlanta area for over 20 years and recently moved to Colorado. And you can tell some folks a little bit about that and what's going on. But we want to get right into the meat of this because this is such a heavy topic, and people, and not just people, I'm going to let you in on a secret here, folks. Many attorneys do not realize the things that go on in the background with your mortgage can be critical to getting your divorce done right. And not just during the divorce, but after. I have been hired numerous times to try and straighten out things that were agreed upon in a divorce that were not possible because the person could not refi according to the terms that the attorneys helped them devise. So Tony, please tell me, let's start with, what is the value of having a divorce team and who should be part of the team?
Yeah, great question, Lisa. So, the value is really to help the client get to the outcome that they're really hoping for and smoothly getting to it. I think, in the divorce scenarios, we always see all sorts of hidden landmines and surprises along the way. So helping to identify those early in the process and getting them to what that desired outcome is. Really, that divorce team, it's going to vary a little bit just based on the person's scenario of, do they have a lot in assets? Do they own a home? Do they own a business? All sorts of different variables. But when those things are in place, having obviously someone like you, a CDFA is very important. A lot of times, having a therapist involved, maybe a mediator involved, and a forensic accountant, maybe somebody else that's important to be involved as well. And then on our side, a CDLP, a certified divorce lending professional, is very important when the couple that's divorcing owns a home or possibly multiple homes. So really, that is the makeup of the team. And the importance of it, again, is just to be able to have that predictable, smooth outcome that both parties are looking for.
And that's critical. And that's the premise behind Divorce Town USA, which is the sponsor of this show, is that divorce takes a team. And this is not a time to do it alone, be alone. You've got to reach out to the right people and start with, your core base, your coach who's going to get you through this, your CDFA, your 2 attorneys, 1 for each spouse, and definitely a therapist to help you handle the emotions in a wise way so that you can make sound decisions. And getting the team involved, ancillary team members like Tony, like a CDLP, and a realtor, an RCSW, a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce on the real estate matters early on is critical. Can't stress that enough, folks. I get a lot of people who come to me. I work primarily with couples as a financial neutral, but I get a lot of couples that say, oh, we're just going to start this refi, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, and have not considered all of the things that need to go into that to set them both up for success. So tell us a little bit about that CDLP designation and you know, how it sets you apart from the typical divorce professional, mortgage professional.
Sure. Yeah, so CDLP, it is a designation specifically for mortgage lenders, certified divorce lending professional, that it started about 10 years ago, Divorce Lending Association. And what it involves is initially getting that designation involves over 20 hours of specific coursework that is very specific to the divorce process and certain things around, you know, taxable events when they're refinancing or selling a property and things that happen through the divorce, but understanding the lending guidelines and how those pertain specifically around divorce. And a lot of times there's different income that's coming into play, potentially, you know, alimony or child support a lot of times. Yes. So understanding all of those different moving parts and mechanics is very different than just doing, you know, just a general loan officer doing loans. Easiest, you know, kind of comparison to tell people is it's very similar to, you know, you're getting a divorce, you're going to go to somebody specifically in family law that practices, you know, helping people go through their divorce, rather than somebody that's maybe a general practicing attorney, somebody that, you know, helps businesses structure documents or filing an LLC or things like that. So very much in that same way is having that extremely specialized knowledge to understand all those moving parts and looking more so forward in how you're qualifying that person, rather than a lot of times in a general refinance, which is very typical of what we're doing in a divorce. You're looking at what their finances look like today, versus in a divorce scenario, a lot of times we're looking at many hypothetical situations of, okay, if they get the house and this much in assets, or if they get this much in alimony or child support, and how does that look, you know, how does that impact us in qualifying? Could be 3, 6 months, a year down the road sometimes that we're actually doing that transaction, but strategically getting them to that place that they're going to be able to qualify.
And I can't agree with you more. And I know that you and I have worked on many cases where we've backed into what the alimony number needs to be in order to qualify so that the refinance or the new purchase can take place, whatever the case may be, and for how long. And that's another critical factor. Many times they leave out the term, they shorten the term so that it no longer is the person eligible. It disregards that. And that's a critical factor. We want to set people up for success. Divorce is hard enough to go through. So making sure that you consult with someone like Tony, a CDLP, is extremely important in this process, whether you're buying, refining, even selling. You know, there are some things that you need to know when you sell to set yourself up for success going forward. And especially if you've not had credit in your own name, if you're not the one paying the mortgage. I know that you've coached people, many clients of mine, through what you need to do to get to that place where you can qualify if you don't right now. So this service that CDLPs provide is immense. And how does someone find a CDLP, and is there a charge for the service, Tony? Let's talk with about that with
great
folks.
question. So easiest way to find any of us, which there's not a ton. I think at this point, still under 1,000 CDLPs in the entire industry, and there's
Wow.
over 20,000 loan officers in the industry. So it's that small of a specialization. But the Divorce Lending Association, if you just go to that website, divorcelendingassociation.com, you can actually search specifically by state that you may be located in. Several of us practice in multiple states. So you may find somebody that is right there local in your market, or someone like myself that, as you said, Lisa, that I lived in Atlanta for 20 plus years. And the majority of my clients that I serve are in Atlanta. But yeah, that's the easiest way to find any of us is on the Divorce Lending Association's website. And then your other question, the charge. So that is the one thing that is very unique about in the divorce team that we talked about a minute ago. We're the only ones that I know of that don't get paid anything until we successfully close a loan. So all of the initial consultations, all the fact finding, all the running hypothetical numbers and strategically coaching our clients in how do we get to that other side, if it's going to be selling the home and then purchasing another property, or maybe we're working with a spouse that has been awarded the home and it's going to be 3 months to a year from now that we're refinancing them. We're doing all that upfront legwork and don't make a dime until we actually successfully close that transaction that we have presented to them of what we're working towards. So that is the very unique thing of working with a CDLP. It doesn't cost you anything up front, and it doesn't cost you anything extra on the back end. We don't charge any sort of an additional fee. You're just the same way of closing on a mortgage, the same as if you go to a general practitioner. You just have somebody with a specialized knowledge to get you into that loan product.
I'm glad you said that, Tony, too, because one of the things that we hear a lot is if I use a team, it's going to be more expensive. And really, you've just showed us that in this case, it actually could save them a lot of money and time because they're not actually going to pay you any additional fees.
Yeah.
And we were recently in a support group last week with an attorney that was moderating the group, and she said the same thing. She said, I'm not a financial expert. You will save a lot of money and time if you use a financial expert like Lisa, or a mortgage expert in divorce like Tony, because I can do all that legwork, but it's going to cost you way more money because those aren't my specialties. Right. And so I love that team, highlighting that team approach to our viewers, that it really does make sense, not just in the quality of the service you're going to get, but actually that it will end up saving you time, energy, and money in the long run.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily on saving of time, but I would say a lot of times it's saving the house and saving the heartache of the one that's just gone through this divorce and they're now on the back side of it. And a lot of times we have a mix. I mean, sometimes we have clients that come to us in the divorce, and unfortunately, sometimes we have people that come to us after the divorce has been finalized, and we're trying to put together transaction to refinance the house the person was awarded, but we're reading the terms of it, and a lot of times, like Lisa had said, it wasn't written the right way to do. But we see in the same thing where somebody calls, a lot of times the one that's been awarded the home, they call who their current lender is thinking, well, they've got my loan, it'll be easy, they'll just put it in my name and it'll be a done deal. And I mean, I had one just recently about a month ago. Lady called me up in tears that had been awarded the home, called their current lender, and the way that the settlement was structured was that the other spouse was getting more than half of the equity, and based on the value, it was going to be at a 90% loan amount, 90% loan to value of what they had had an appraisal of during the process. Well, when they called their current lender, they just went into a call center, somewhere off in Michigan, I think. And the person in the call center didn't know any better, read the settlement agreement, was like, you can't do this. It's a cash out refinance, and the most you can go cash out is 80%. And so they're like, well, I don't have the other money to come up with. And so they literally were on the verge of listing their house, thought they were going to have to sell the house, had no idea where they were going to go and rent. And I was like, it's not a cash out refinance. It's in a divorce scenario. There's a very specific way of doing it, what they call an equity buyout. And we successfully closed that, a few weeks later. So it's those sort of things that we see happen on our end that Yeah, I mean, that could certainly cost them a lot of money, but more importantly, it was like, it was potentially going to cost this person their house if they were going to think they had to sell the house.
Yes, and then the angst of that, the stress of trying to find a new place in this kind of market. You know, there's no price you can put on all of that. So these are
Sure.
the things that we stress here at the Divorce Do's and Don'ts show. These are the things that you do want to do up front, which is get all the information, have every angle checked. That's what a CDFA does here. We come in, we look at every line item, we figure out what the ins and outs are, the pros and cons, who to connect you to. And when it comes to the house, you should be dealing with a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce, a realtor who knows that information, and a divorce mortgage lending professional, certified divorce mortgage lending professional like Tony. And I would never recommend anyone else, because this is the case, folks. There, you don't know what you don't know when you haven't had the specialized training. I know I was in the investment advisory field for many years, and I thought I knew how to help people going through divorce, but it wasn't until I got the certification as a CDFA, a certified divorce financial analyst, that I realized I didn't know what I didn't know. And
Yeah.
so when you bring in the specialists and you have them working together, you get a much better result for your particular situation. So Tony, when in the divorce process, and I think we've kind of talked about this, would be ideal for someone to consult with a CDLP?
Definitely the sooner the better. There's, I would say, never a time too early in the process. I have people sometimes that reach out to me. Unfortunately, sometimes it's my past clients that I helped that bought a home, and then a few years later, one of them reaches out, hey, we're looking at getting divorced. We're just kind of starting to talk about it, sort of a thing. And that's fine. I mean, that's, again, there's never a too early time. It's much better to get us involved as early as possible in the process to really start digging in, uncovering the different debts that both parties have. That a lot of times is going to help them as they're talking with you or their attorneys of how are we dividing the debts outside of the mortgage? And then getting an understanding of what is that debt to income ratio going to look like for the one that's potentially being awarded the home, or maybe they both have decided to sell it and one or both want to qualify to buy another home immediately after the divorce. So as early as possible that we can be involved in those conversations, and it really is conversations in the beginning and talking through, you know, kind of what their thoughts are, what they're hoping, you know, to get to, and is that realistic? The sooner that we know that is going to really be able to, for us to help strategically get them to that place, versus when we get clients referred to us post divorce and we're reading the settlement agreement, a good bit of the time we can still make something work, but not always. And so it makes our job much more difficult if we've gotten this client at the end and we're kind of scratching our heads wondering, like, what did the clients or their attorneys, like, how did they come up with this, and how did they think this was going to work? And so again, as early as possible is the best time to really consult with us.
Absolutely. You know, as a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce myself, you know, the motto of the organization that I got my training through, it's divorce your spouse and the house, right? So even if you're not going to sell the house, you still need to be divorced from the mortgage, because you're still liable if your name is on it. And so there are so many factors that go into this part of the divorce. Also, it's one piece. You know, if you've got retirement and you've got brokerage accounts and maybe other properties, whatever you have, the mortgage can be used in such a way, potentially, depending on the amount of equity, to help offset things that may not be divisible, such as a pension. Sometimes we have pensions that are not divisible. You know, we look at it for many purposes. It also can be a way to pay off debts that you have in the process, and everybody start clean. So, you know, we can't stress enough here to start early, with this piece of things, and start early with all of it, but especially this piece, because it's critical to everything else. So what are some of the common mistakes that you see homeowners make in this process, Tony?
Probably one of the most common is something that you touched on a minute ago, of not understanding in terms of the length of time that somebody is going to need it for receiving alimony or child support. Child support's a little bit more tricky because it's going to be based around generally the age of the child, and in most states, 18, 19 years old. And so there's not a lot that you can necessarily do with that of lengthening it. You could, theoretically, but I rarely ever see that, number change. Alimony definitely, on the other hand, is something where, as you mentioned, what we refer to in our industry, the 636 rule. And what that means is, for most every loan product out there, if you're going to now be receiving alimony or child support, the person receiving it needs to have had it for at least 6 months receipt, and then another 36 months or 3 years beyond what the date of that mortgage closing is going to be. So a lot of times I'll see maybe they're getting alimony for 1 or 2 years, and it could be a sizable amount that, had the dollar amount per month maybe been adjusted slightly downward but stretched out further for 3 or 4 years, that can be a make or break situation in qualifying a lot of times. That's a big one that we see a lot. The other one that I've seen very frequently here over the last year for some reason, and I don't know if it's just with values going up on properties quite a bit, but I always recommend, getting a third-party appraiser at some point in the process, just to give you a general idea of what the property value is. On the mortgage side, we're still going to need to do another appraisal at some point, but at least it's somewhere establishing what that value is and establishing an actual dollar amount on what that equity split's going to be. So one of the things I've seen, like the last 3 divorce clients I've worked with that have been after they've gotten divorced and we got the settlement agreement, they all have had the language where it just said the one not being awarded the home was getting 50% of the equity. And it had another sentence or two about, how that was defined was going to be based on the appraised value minus the payoff on the home. One of them said payoff on the home minus closing cost. Well, the thing is, it's like, that's too vague of an amount. And so every single one of them, it ended up in, post-divorce, further litigation, that the other one that was getting the equity didn't agree with either the appraisal that was done or one that they were splitting, minus the balance and minus closing costs. They thought the closing costs on the loan were too high. And so if they can structure that up front and put a specific dollar amount on exactly how much the one that's not getting the home but getting half the equity, putting a specific dollar amount on that is going to just further help, minimize any disagreements and further litigation after the divorce. And that's a big mistake that I see people having in their settlement agreements. Those are really probably 2 of the most common. And then the other would be the one that's being awarded the home, not involving any sort of mortgage lender, either a CDLP or just a regular lender at any part of the process until they've gotten divorced. And then they have no idea that they've got, issues going on that they're not going to be able to qualify. So it's, one of those things of just ignoring it and, burying their head in the sand and figuring, oh, when it's all done, it'll all be fine. And so not being adequately prepared is a huge mistake that we see a lot of times.
Oh, yes, to all of that. I have been involved in cases where they have spent more on the divorce after the divorce, trying to straighten problems out with the mortgage or the house sale than they did when they got divorced. So this is, again, folks, we're trying to help you out here. These are the do's, and Tony's sharing the don'ts of what to do when you're getting divorced and you have a house involved. One of the things that I know people ask me, and I'm sure you get this question, is can I refinance the house into my name if my soon-to-be ex-spouse is agreeable before the divorce is finalized? What are your thoughts on that?
It depends. It'll depend a little bit on the state guidelines that you're in. Most every state, yes, you could do that. And it's really just a matter of if both parties are completely amicable and agreeable to it, then yes, you certainly could. And we've done quite a few that way. And instead of actually doing them as a true equity buyout, maybe the people had plenty of equity and they actually just structured it as a cash out refinance. There's no question really asked necessarily of like what that cash is being used for. And so it's just up to them of cashing out, paying the soon to be ex a portion of that. But yes, I mean, if both parties are agreeable, conceivably that's, I mean, we do it quite often that you can get divorced, or I'm sorry, do the refinance before the divorce is finalized.
But that also makes, you know, we have to emphasize here that the person that's doing the refi into their name can qualify. And
Right.
that doesn't need alimony or child support. They have their own income to be able to do that. For
Correct.
instance,
Yes,
you know,
yes, that's definitely going to be one of the biggest caveats is do they qualify completely on their own, you know, without any potential, you know, future alimony or child support and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely going to be a big part of it.
Is there a certain amount of time that child support or alimony needs to be in place to use it as income to qualify for a loan? I think we touched on that, but let's go over that again because it's really an important point.
Yeah, so they need to, for most every loan product, they need to have been receiving it for 6 months, and you've got to show proof of that. So the borrower that's getting that is going to need to show, you know, several months of bank statements to show that the ex has been paying them, you know, on time. That's one of the biggest challenges sometimes that we face is it could be, you know, 5-6 months later and the ex hasn't paid them on time for the child support or alimony, or it's been, you know, spotty here or there, or paying a lesser amount than what was court ordered. That's a whole other legal issue in and of itself, but it makes it where they're not going to qualify if they're not having on-time regular payments, or if the one paying them is paid less than what the court order says. The lender is going to look at what they've actually been paying, $500 a month instead of $800 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So at least 6 months of on-time, you know, receipt of payment, and then another 36 months or 3 years from the date that you're actually closing. So when you back into those numbers, from the date that the divorce is finalized, theoretically, you really need at least 42 months or longer. I always advise people, hey, if we're working on this, we have to have this for part of the divorce, make it for 48 months, because by the time you've got 6 months receipt, like we can start the process in month 5 or 6. And that would be one of our conditions of closing to show, okay, they've got now 6 months that they've received, but you still need another 36 months. And so I always tell people, have some buffer time in there so that if there's something that delays things, you don't want to cut it too short and be like, well, you have, you know, 35 months of the next, you know, and not qualifying.
Right.
So those are very, very important. The other thing to mention too is that because child support is not taxable, we can actually increase that number. We can gross that number up. So if they're getting, say, $1,000 a month in child support, for example, we can run the numbers like they're getting $1,250 in child support instead of $1,000. So, and then there's some qualifications too for the one that is paying the child support or alimony if they're trying to qualify on a house. There's some different ways to calculate that out of their debt to income ratio, reducing their income instead of an actual debt. So it's very specific around, you know, who's paying it, you know, how long it's coming. Are we qualifying the one receiving it, or are we qualifying the one paying it?
Well, now, I'm sorry, Tony, I just want to ask you a quick question before I forget here.
Yeah.
Now, alimony is no longer taxable. So are you able to do the same with that?
Yes. Yes. So same rule there. And But what I was going to say is that for the one that might be paying the alimony or child support, if they're trying to purchase a home, certain loan products will actually allow you to subtract that number from their income instead of adding it as a debt. And that makes a tremendous difference when you're calculating the debt to income ratios, especially if it's a large amount that they're paying out.
Oh, that's great. So I know I've worked with you in many cases, and I've seen, you've got a lot of tools in your tool chest there that you can pull out with different lenders, with different products, with different, I guess, requirements from those different lenders. And that's the beauty, again, of having a CDLP working with you, because you know the ins and outs of all of that. I've seen you get loans for people that have never been able to get a loan, turned down multiple times. So this is important stuff, folks. I hope you're taking some good notes here. What is the cost involved?
Sorry, Lisa, we're at the 12:30 mark, so we're going to have to actually wrap it up for today and go off air. But all of these questions, the audience can ask on their own, because we are right at 12:30 now.
Okay. All right. We'll see you next week, folks.
Sorry about that, everyone. Please join us next week for, we're going to continue the real estate theme just a little bit longer, and we're going to talk about successful real estate and staging strategies to get top dollar if you are going to sell. So join us for that with Pam Evans next week as our guest. And it was so good to see all of you. We will see you all next week, as always, same time, same place, different topic.
Be sure to join us, folks. There's more do's and don'ts here.
Thank you, everyone.
I think we're still recording.